Own your mess. That's the message from this week's guest, and it's one most of us need to hear. We all make mistakes. We all chase the wrong things, ignore the right ones, and one day we find ourselves staring at a life that doesn't quite fit anymore. For a lot of men, the moment arrives in midlife. Some call it a crisis. Some just go quiet and push through. Stephen Keys did neither. When this high-flying CEO left his marriage, the silence hit hard. Kids gone most of the week, and a loneliness he hadn't seen coming. So he did something he'll admit was completely selfish. He volunteered at a soup kitchen just to fill the hours.
You meet people that don't care about who you are, where you come from.
Yeah, your stories are relevant.
So you get to know each other in a different perspective, and then somehow that sense of belonging, that sense of community, that sense of being of service to someone else. This is something that really feels important to me.
That one act cracked something open. He changed careers so he could do work that actually meant something, delivering clean water, education, and real hope to communities in Sri Lanka who had no hope. He calls it the greatest gift his career ever gave him. This is exactly the kind of conversation this podcast exists for. Midlife reinvention, career change, men's mental health, starting over at 50, what it actually means to live with purpose. It's raw, it's honest, and it's worth your time. I'm Pat O'Sullivan, host of Don't Let the Old Man In, and a fellow midlife work in progress. I'm currently studying at Oxford, learning the things that no one thought to teach us, including how to navigate the second half of life without losing the plot. If someone recommended this to you, tell them I said thanks. And if you're new here, you're most welcome. This is your midlife learning podcast, the ups, the downs, the reinventions, and how to make the second half the best half.
Here's Pat O'Sullivan with Don't Let the Old Man In, a podcast from the Wisdom Vault.
Let's start here. This is a special episode, Stephen Keys. The last time we appeared on a podcast together was September 2020 during COVID.
Wow.
The listeners for this show are midlife. We know that many, if not at least half of us, will change our partners at around midlife and do something different. And divorce is a huge part of our life. You took up writing recently, and I want to come back to that. But in your writing, you've been extraordinarily open and transparent about you, the human being that you are, including personal aspects of your life and including going through a divorce. And you have written that it was a painful shock for which you take full responsibility. Mm-hmm. What I'm interested in is the leading up to separating and divorce and the decision process to go through that. And I appreciate in this conversation, it's just your perspective.
Yep.
We've nobody else in this conversation except for you and me.
Yep.
But I'm interested in hearing more about in hindsight, what was that process for you that led you to, I want to go down this route and basically uproot my life dramatically?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer, and I think you're right to call out perspective, right? Whatever I share is just my perspective. There are many other people that have different perspectives, and I honour and respect that. I don't claim any ownership of the truth here. And I certainly don't wish to cause any more hurt or pain to those that have already suffered quite enough through everything that happened. What I can say is that I felt, I can reflect now, look back, and I was desperately unhappy. Our relationship had got to the point where there was an absence of emotional or physical intimacy, and the real regret that I have is that I didn't do anything about it at the time, that it took an external event. I met someone, I fell in love with someone else. It took an external event like that for me to kind of like to shake me out of, this kind of torpor. I remember, we've been married 15 years. I remember thinking one point, I can't remember, 12, 13 years, maybe this is what happens. Maybe this is what normal is. I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to about that. I just kept my feelings to myself and just, okay, soldier on, right? Let's be stoic, and maybe it'll get better. And I look back and it's like, it's obviously incredibly flawed thinking. And if there's one regret that I have, I wish I'd called it out sooner, done something about that. I think that might have, I don't know whether that would have eased the pain or the shock for my kids or families or whatever, but I wish I'd recognized that and done something about it. But I didn't. And then subsequently, when all that happened, you go through counselling and the question was asked of us, you're like, what was the analogy? You're two people and you set off on a path together into a forest, and there's a piece of string attached between you, and you both wander off in different directions at some point, and that can happen in a relationship. And at some point you realize you've become lost from your partner, and you look down at the piece of string. Is that still attached? Because if it is, then you can keep pulling on that string and find your way back to each other, or has it been cut? And for me, it had been cut. It was that, and it was quite an interesting analogy, because in that moment when she asked that question, it was like, no, that's been cut. It's been cut because for so many reasons, the depth of my unhappiness and this feeling of not being authentic to who I was, of living a life that just didn't feel like it was me. I'm sorry for that. I am desperately sorry for the pain that caused, but it felt necessary, because I was desperately unhappy.
Thank you for sharing that. I think there'd be many of us listening who recognize a loveless or a sexless relationship, but we should stay in it.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. I remember when leading up to my own divorce, and a long, long time ago, thinking, I'm watching my own parents who haven't spoken in 20 years to each other.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that.
No.
I just can't be that. So,
no, but but there are also probably many other people, and I don't want this to turn into an advocacy for, getting out and divorced, but for sure not. There's many other people that might pull on that string, find their way back to each other.
Correct.
But I think what I learned really from it is relationships take effort. They take work. You have to work at your relationship, and I hadn't. I hadn't invested in relationships meaningfully. I hadn't done that properly. I'd let myself down in that way, and it happened that I neglected that so much that for me that had dissipated and fallen away. Right, and I no longer the line was the string was cut. Yeah. But for many others that might still be there. But it does take effort.
Going through divorce, men, for a range of different reasons, often end up with custody of their children a lot less than their wife does, or their partner did. There's a whole range of reasons for that.
Yep.
Different countries have got different legal frameworks, or different expectations, or society have got different expectations. And I'm not going on the argument of femininity versus masculinity in that regard. But I do remember you telling me a lot about the weekends without your boys, and you use a phrase called your identity was stripped bare.
Yeah.
And I'm asking this question because a lot of people listening to this might be in that situation right now, are contemplating, do I want to go down that route, because it's really hard.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your experience of moments of loneliness or despair, or whatever you were feeling that's worth sharing for that specific moment, which of course is long past now.
Yeah, it still feels very present in many ways, because the kids are still here and we still have a relationship, and it was a very confusing and hurtful time for them. We've had to slowly rebuild over a period of time, so I'm sure also they have a perspective on how that felt. It's very hard. I'd say that, how can I put it? Relationships are very important, and if you can find a way to pull on that string, you find a way back to each other, and in so doing, being happy in yourself, then brilliant, good on you. That's really important. But I felt quite strongly that in order for me I needed to be happy first, in order to be the father that I wanted to be, in order to be the son that I wanted to be the friend that I wanted to be, all those things. I had to be grounded myself first, and I wasn't, and I needed to deal with that. Divorce became a part of that process. So yes, you leave the family home, and moved into an apartment, and your kids are like 20 kilometers away doing their weekend duties with mum, and you're not there. And that fatherhood is a really important part of your identity, right? It's my kids, they're young. It's very difficult. So you're very lonely, and I didn't have a big circle of friends at the time, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. It was bloody awful. So fortunately, I didn't have any money, so I couldn't go down the route of
divorce. Can be costly.
Yeah, well, it's an expensive hobby.
Do it once only.
So I didn't have money in my back pocket to go and get pissed every night, or every day or whatever. So thankfully that wasn't an option available to me. So what do you do with all this time on your hands? So I threw myself into work as much as I could, but you still had your weekends. It was awful. Anyway, the long story short, through a series of happenstances, whatever, I came across volunteering. I was looking, an incredibly selfish act. I was just looking for an opportunity to just fill my days, to get away from this horrible sense of loneliness and desperately missing my kids. So I started volunteering. I think the first one was a soup kitchen just outside Manly. And that was once a month, just anything to while away the time. And you do it and gives you a perspective because you meet some people that are doing it tough as well. And okay, they kind of get, look after yourself a little bit, right? Yeah. Come on, right? Think, perspective, like I say. But then also there's a sense of belonging. You meet people that don't care about who you are, where you come from.
Yeah, your stories are irrelevant.
It's irrelevant to the situation. So you're making meals for 50 people. And so you get to know each other in a different perspective. And then somehow that sense of belonging, that sense of community, that sense of being of service to someone else really started to resonate with me. And this idea of like some core values started emerging. Hang on a minute, this is something that really feels important to me. And as I say, massively selfish act, right? Helped me while away some of those awful hours.
Just a quick break. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I hope you are too. What I've been doing with these episodes is a couple of days after I record the conversation, I sit down, grab my ideas, and I put together my reflections on the conversation and what I've learned from them and what kind of sense am I making from them. That's called my reflections episode. I also try an experiment to actually apply what I've got from the conversation. You can listen to that in an episode. You can also download a simple handout on don'tlettheoldmanin.com/reflections to help you do the same. Back to the conversation. You also got your sons involved in volunteering over time, didn't you? Which was a great way of reconnecting in a new conversation that you didn't have to necessarily always be talking about the old conversation.
Yeah, of course. It was a very confusing and painful time for the kids. They were hurt, confused, angry at me, rightly so, upset, all those things. And of course, the shuffling back and forth in the house were massively disruptive. And all the patterns, all the places you're going to are the places where you've been to with mum and dad. So it just there's all these reminders all the time. I found a way to put as much money as I could to get away on holidays together and go to like places we'd never been to before as families. So I sold my kayak, my 580 Mirage Kevlar kayak, which I loved. Sold that, turned that into a holiday in Vietnam. Fantastic. Yeah. But it was about creating third spaces, new spaces where we could just be father and sons together without all those reminders. Yeah. And that felt really important. And volunteering became one of those things. I came across a charity called Kids Giving Back. Fantastic organisation. They're all about giving kids the chance to volunteer, so teaching the next generation about generosity. And so that was with Edward, my youngest, and it was brilliant. Right, you'd cook a meal together, and then you'd go and deliver it to a local refuge or hospice, or even to individual homes. And it was like, I don't know, we were interacting with each other in a different way, having a new experience, shared experience together. And I'd see my son in a different way as well. He'd knock on these doors and he'd confidently walk in and talk to total strangers, and he'd show incredible empathy, a real gift for understanding. And it's like, okay, and suddenly we're learning things together. And then Harrison did his Duke of Edinburgh and he wanted to do football refereeing, so I did that. And that also became a great outlet, right? So I also trained up to become a referee. And for anyone that's listening, so I was a referee on the Manly Warringah Referee Football Association.
Forgive me now.
Well, no, if I gave you a yellow card, yes, it was me, and yes, you deserved it. And,
But I might have had a bad day.
But, so it was like I could do 3 games on a Saturday, 3 games on a Sunday. Some of them, like he was on another field, we could share experience, talk about that. Yeah. And also great people management skills and all that kind of stuff, bit of money in your back pocket, pay for dinner that night. And it was suddenly more than just the selfish act of trying to avoid those absent hours. It became a new way of connecting with my kids, a new language that could evolve, and a new way of sharing a space together.
There's a few things around that I just want to maybe double click into. Like you've written in one of your articles that your divorce was necessary for reasons that you now only understand.
Yeah.
But use that as a segue into what I remember as an observer of you during that time, and the occasional listener and co-ranters, maybe co-venters. But I remember a few things. Because of the work that I do and you and I do, we've had many conversations with many men who have gone through separations.
Yes.
And who unfortunately lose the relationship with their children. Hopefully they regain over time.
Yep.
They partly lose it because they don't do what you did. They didn't put the effort into, let me create a third space, or let me stay in the conversation with my child who's angry at me,
Yep.
knowing that they're entitled to be angry with me,
Yes.
but we should still stay in the conversations.
Yes.
Over time,
Yep.
they might understand more,
Yep.
they might appreciate life isn't perfect and
Yep.
whatever. And the second thing that I really want to double click in is, you said a few minutes ago, you were not wealthy at that time. You were not wealthy at all. You were on, if I could say, on the bones of your arse.
Yeah.
If I can use that very Australian colloquium. But you did things such as refereeing that happened to give you a couple of bucks, which you then could buy a dinner with your sons with, right?
Yeah, for sure.
They are really simple things to do.
Yep.
And I think a lot of us overlook the simplicity of those things, but also the huge impact it can have.
It can. You've got to keep showing up. It's easy to, you made a couple of things just think kids are angry and they're right to be. And maybe kids also think very much in black and white terms, right? And as we go a bit older, we realise it's shades of grey, right? But of course, they've got every reason they're entitled to feel anger and upset. And there were times when they expressed that anger at me very directly, or they just didn't talk to me at all. But you've got to keep showing up. You don't give up on your kids, right? And so you keep going, and you hope that one day they come back, and they do, and they are, and I've got a great relationship with my boys now, and I put that down at least in part to just trying to find those spaces, trying to keep showing up. So that's a bit hard to talk about.
Father's Day is often a great happy day, and Father's Day is often a day of despair for the reason you've just said. So anyone listening to this who has had a tough Father's Day for the reasons we just talked about, you have to show up, because the good days may not be too far away.
Yeah, the boys call you by your first name, they don't call you dad and stuff like that, and they know it hurts, and boy, it does hurt. But you just go, you got to accept it. You got to keep showing up, and they do come back. So the eldest is 25 now. And the youngest is 20, and we're getting there. We've formed a new relationship, a better relationship. Different, you can't avoid what's happened in the past. Different, perhaps a little bit more accepting, and we're finding ways to build a relationship again as friends and as father and son in a different way.
Yeah. Can I segue from that by quoting a writer called Bob Burford?
Oh, yeah.
He wrote a book called Halftime, which is moving from success to significance.
Yeah.
David Brooks also wrote a book called The Second Mountain. It's a similar idea. Bob Burford's book has got a lot of Christian overtones, but put that aside to it, because the message is broadly similar. And that is that life transitions in the first half of your life, specifically for men, are often orientated towards getting my career, prove myself, move up the ranks, and in your case, become a group CEO in an organization that might list and become a public organization, right? And he says the second half of life, or in David Brooks' case, the second mountain, is moving from success to significance. Bob talks about a process where you pick one concept or one word to help you navigate that second half. Yeah. For you identify the word community.
Yes.
And the whole philosophy and concept of community as your single word in that black box that he refers to. So I have a few questions around this for people who are not aware of the process. First of all, how did you go through that process? How long did it take? Were there other kind of concepts that you just put aside, or were you just like straight there?
No, not at all. I think it was an exercise we did. It was in a workshop, and one of the exercises was you have those 52 value cards. You go out, and so you have the kind of deck of cards. I think they're United Nations aligned values. I think that's where it comes from. And so you're invited to pick 15. Right, out of the 52 that matter to you. There's not a lot of moral hazard in that. Well, 15 is pretty easy to find. And then you reduce it down to 10, a bit harder, but some easy trades, so it led down to 10. Then the exercise is to go to 5. And that becomes really hard. And you have to, then you're encouraged to kind of pair up or in small groups explain why those 5 and not those, and so on, and what it is that compels you towards them. And I remember that community was one of those. There was others, belonging, loyalty, being of service to others, lifelong learning, sense of achievement, community. And it was one of those things that kind of, at the time, was a bit of a playful exercise. Okay, it's a great way to get to know each other. I didn't really think too much of it, but it stuck with me. And I kept on coming back to it. And what I realized was the times when I felt happiest was when one or more of these things was evident. So yes, achievement in a corporate context, I did get some joy out of that. There were some things that were meaningful in my corporate career. Of course, I used to say I'm happiest when I'm learning and earning, right? And so that makes sense now. That's what actually really, really matters to me. But then this idea of being of service to others, I realized I'm really happy in those moments. Yes, loyalty matters, and I think that came through in that decision also to go with Darren at IFS, and because we were loyal to one another, we'd been through a lot together. But this idea of community kept emerging. It emerges, it comes out through the IFS Foundation and that work, community-led partnership. It came out in the work with the refereeing, Manly Ringer Referee Football Association, a wonderful community and sense of belonging. Kids Giving Back gave me a sense of belonging, a sense of community. And it just kept on coming out. And so today, it really, even at a most fundamental level, one of the things I realized I did when I was younger and married was outsource some relationships that were really important to me. I didn't
outsource them.
It's a hard way of putting it, but my wife would often take care of the relationship with mum and dad. She would speak with my mum and dad more than I would, because I was super busy with my career and doing all these other things, or friendships. I perhaps saw them as maybe more transactional, and I wasn't investing in perhaps the way that I should. And so, community took on many more different aspects. And I realized, hang on a minute, if that really matters, how do I square that with my behavior? Yeah. And it's like, suddenly that idea of, if that really does matter, then I have to make sure it manifests itself in my life on a day-to-day basis.
So you used the word, well, you didn't use the word, community became a really important thing for you, but it helped you change your identity. Identity from a hyper-focused, transactional-based, career-oriented, I'm going to get there, to, hold on, there's a lot more to what I want to focus on than just that.
Well, perhaps to say that I look at that, there was that aspect of me that kind of the sense of achievement is there. So there's some aspects in that important, great, but community might have been missing from some of that. Or perhaps it's, how do I actually bring a greater sense of community into my professional work? So if this thing is important, how do I make sure I'm manifesting it? I shouldn't just go, oh, that's not important right now, I'll deal with that later. But no, if it's that important, it clearly was, I could feel it. Then the challenge to myself was, how can I bring that into my work? It changed my views on leadership. It changed my views on where I choose to spend my time outside of work. Yeah, it had a massive transformational effect on how I think and act and behave, and still does today.
Today, how do you use that to navigate you today?
Instead of trying to take everything on myself, I'm often thinking about, here's something I'm interested in. How can I bring a group of like-minded people together to see how we can work on this particular issue together? And the example I've got in mind is I met a chap recently, it's October last year, Keegan. He runs a charity over in Perth called On My Feet. And it's about, it's basically a running club for people experiencing homelessness. So it's about, a sense of discipline, commitment, and self-improvement, and all the goodness that comes out of that. I feel good running, people feel good running, maybe people experiencing homelessness feel that way. And I kind of thought, geez, I'd really like to do something in that space. It'd be great to work with Keegan and help him expand his ideas, because he's so earnest and he really believes in this, and I could really lean into that. I really want to help this guy, I want to help my friend. But rather than thinking, oh, then I should just do something by myself, it's like, I wonder who else I know. And it so happens that I know a charity called Impart in Singapore. We experience homelessness in a different way in Singapore than perhaps in Australia. So Impart is a charity that focuses on youth at risk. Suddenly I'm having a conversation with On My Feet, with Impart. There's a wonderful software organization called Wakato in Singapore that's co-branding that work. Suddenly we've got this community of like-minded people all going, yeah, this makes sense. How do we all make this work? I get far greater satisfaction out of being an enabler and facilitator of that than I ever did from, come on chaps, away we go. It's
What's the quality of outcome like?
Well, we're just starting that, but we've got the kit organized and we've got, kids are signing up to it. And I tell you, so far, I just look forward to every one of those conversations. Yeah. And it's brilliant. So the guy from Impart they've asked to kind of run it, he's someone that's been through their program as well. He was a youth at risk in his younger days, and he's grown up. He now works at Impart. And he shared his story and his background with me. And he told me just how much this means to him. And he's been incredibly generous with his time and his truths. Wow, like what generosity to share something that is so meaningful and so important to you with me over a cup of coffee. And that generosity of spirit is something that It's incredible. It's an incredible gift.
Something there about the collective working together for collective outcomes as opposed to the individual working for the individual outcome.
Yep.
You mentioned Sri Lanka a while ago. One thing we have lost, or we are rapidly losing, in countries like Australia, but also England and the US and England a bit more than Australia, but we're not far behind, is our individualistic society. The individual performs for the individual. Strive and you will be successful.
Yes, the sovereign individual, right?
Assumes that your own outcome is more important than anybody else's outcome, and strive for it. And there's a lot of good in that. Capitalistic society, innovation often thrives in that kind of starting place. But the collective view gets more sustainable outcomes for everybody.
Yes.
Almost more often.
Yes.
Sorry, almost always more often.
Yes. Yeah.
But it requires a mindset shift of the individual to go, I could do this with this person in Perth and he and I would do it and I'd be the hero.
Yeah.
Or I can rope in
Yeah.
quite a few other organizations and they might have better ideas than me.
Yes.
But together we get a better outcome.
Yes, so much more rewarding and so much more relevant. You actually think about the needs of the community. So rather than just assuming we know what's best. Cormac Russell talked about the connected community, and that's a really powerful idea of his, is actually let the community figure these things out. And rather than needs-based, trying to think about fixing things or what's wrong, look for what's strong in a community and build on those foundations and give a clear share of voice and let it be community-led. He asked the question, what's the opposite of literacy? And most people would say illiteracy, right? But illiteracy is a deficit. He argues the opposite of literacy is orality, which is a strength.
Orality as in storytelling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So it's a strength. Changes your whole mindset about ideas around literacy. Yeah. So, okay, then in which case, if orality is a strength of a community, how might literacy serve that community? How might it be used in appropriate ways to serve their needs rather than just, well, what you're doing is wrong, you need to be doing this. Yeah. It's a very different mindset.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take too many steps to then start thinking about that in lots of different ways in a community context.
So it's taking that idea, and I don't know Cormac at all, but take that idea, instead of coming to, we need to teach you how to write because clever people write, it might be, you guys got great stories.
Yeah.
How do we teach you to capture them?
Yes, exactly that, right? And if we did that, what value would that hold? Yeah. And does that hold meaning for you? And in which case, then let's do it, right? And then we maybe can serve as an enabler and facilitator of that, but it's very much led by the community. You take that a step further, and then you actually realise that fundamentally the world's made up of decent people, of wonderful communities with very clear ideas about what the strengths are of those particular communities and where we might be able to serve as useful outsiders. Much healthier conversation.
Time for a quick break. And if you're enjoying this episode with Stephen, you're going to love what's coming in the next few weeks. A relationships expert shares her tips on dating after divorce from a woman's perspective, so you actually know what you're walking into. We're digging into why men's circles are growing so fast and what men are getting out of them, because connection might be the thing you didn't know you needed. Plus the 7 mindsets for a great second half of life, because knowing them could change everything about how you play it. Don't miss any of it. Hit subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. Now, back to the show. You mentioned a while ago you started volunteering almost out of desperation. I have nothing to do. I'm at home by myself. What do? I need to fill in my time. And I need to fill in my time in a way that doesn't cost me money because I didn't have it.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That's very fair.
So volunteering costs me nothing. It fills in my time. I might feel good at the end of it.
Yep.
Let me have a go.
Yeah.
You had 4:30 a.m. Saturday shifts at Willing Hearts. I remember you telling me the story during COVID.
Yes.
And you used to turn up at 4:30 to fill in your time.
Yes.
But also over time, you talked about the aunties and they scold the way you used to cook the rice.
Yes.
Tell us that story.
Okay.
What did those lovely ladies teach you?
Now, this is a charity that makes about 8,000 meals a day.
Wow.
8,000 meals a day.
Singapore?
In Singapore. They're about 10,000 now, I think, maybe more. And they make 24 days a year, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. They every single day they're producing food.
For whom?
For whom? For people in need, for people that are experiencing food poverty.
So either homeless or they have no money,
People
or
experiencing some degree of homelessness in the Singaporean context, or people that are just struggling to put food on the table, right? For whatever reason, in whatever context. 8,000 meals a day, and it would normally consist of rice and some kind of meat or veggies, whatever, depending on your food dietary requirements. So you'd have these rice ovens, 21 rice ovens. Each one could fit a rice pot that could have about 80, 90 portions of rice in. Big metal pot, muslin, kind of gauze inside. You put that in, put the rice in, fill it up with water, stick it in. 15 minutes later, whatever, you put it out. It's bloody hot, right? So you'd have the gloves, and you'd have to you'd bring it out, you'd empty the pot, and if you were good, you could kind of take the muslin gauze in your hands, because the gloves wouldn't really work. You have the risk of scalding, but you could go flip in the pot and away it goes. And so then Auntie would come through, grab the pot, you put 2 or 3 of these into it, refill the pots, put the ovens in. You'd have to go through
you
the cycle.
explain the word auntie for folks who don't know Singapore?
Anyone that is older than you, or you're trying to, it's a term of respect. So, the lady that works at the supermarket you might call auntie. If an employee at work, if a colleague at work brings a kid in, they might call me uncle, right? It's a kind of a term of endearment. It's a polite term.
But it also talks to Singapore society in terms of the respect. And we had a lady called Professor Virginia Cha on here, and she talks about Singapore being so frictionless because we respect each other.
Yeah, and there is that. And so auntie and uncle is kind of is a term of respect, I think, typically for someone that's a bit older than you. So the aunties were these older ladies that also show up there every day volunteering. So what you do, the rice gets put into the kind of the big serving pot and gets taken out, and then they've got like a supply chain conveyor. So it was a big supply chain, right? Working every day. They put the rice in, and then the meat and the vegetables in, and whatever. So you'd be doing that, you get scolded up and down your arms and stuff. But I liked it. I was part of a team, right? And I was pretty good at the rice cooking. But sometimes, you wouldn't be producing rice quickly enough, and they'd be coming in and tut-tutting and, come on, it's time to get more rice going. Okay. And you'd make the mistake, you'd then rush the process. And so it'd come out and it wouldn't be cooked properly, or it'd be sticky or whatever. And then they'd bring it back, your rice no good, white boy, keep doing it again. and so, oh my God. So what I learned is the best phrase, have you seen that Brad Pitt movie, the F1, about the Formula One thing? And he uses that phrase, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That's what I learned. Slow is smooth. Slow it down, make the process smooth. And once you actually start getting to a bit of a rhythm, you actually find you can actually start speeding it up. So once you're in a nice smooth rhythm, it's much faster than, oh God, we've got to do this, and running around like in a mad panic. I'm not drawing too much of a long bow to say that also influences my thinking in life as well. As I still do get quite agitated by things quite easily, but I'm trying to learn a little bit, like sometimes slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Actually, take it down, calm down, right? Don't let it affect you. What do you need to do in that moment?
You've written that at that point of your life, you had nothing.
Yeah.
But you still had something to give. And I think that's a beautiful paradox in itself. But it's also a really important moment of everyone listening to this will be points of your life where you feel like I have nothing, or worse still, I might be nothing.
Yeah.
How do you think now in terms of what's the scaffolding to move away from I have nothing to I actually have something to give?
I learned that lesson at Kids Giving Back. So I mentioned about how with Kids Giving Back, me and Edward went to this charity. You go to one big kitchen, there's a bunch of kids, bunch of adults, you cook a bunch of meals together and you go deliver them. But while the food's being cooked, they normally have some of the volunteers are people who have experienced homelessness. And they talk about, it's kids, right? So you talk about what are the stereotypes that you experience? What do you think of when you think of someone that's homeless, right? The obvious stereotype is an older man, scraggly beard, smelly, pushing a shopping trolley around, all that type of stuff. And then you start to unpack, what does homelessness really look like? It looks like kids who are couch surfing. It looks like young mums who are trying to escape abusive relationships. It looks like a whole bunch of things that are absolutely very different to our stereotypical views. One of the things they talked about was having experienced homelessness, the horror of sit down in the street, you're begging, you've got your begging bowl out, and they would say that 99% of the time you just felt invisible. People would just avoid eye contact. They would walk on the other side of the street. They would pretend to be looking at their phone. They just saw right through you. And that feeling of just not being witnessed or not being seen was incredibly difficult from a mental health perspective. And so their advice, their encouragement was, hey, by all means, give money or give someone a sandwich or whatever. But if you can, crouch down, say good day.
Yeah.
Just say good day. How you going? What's happening today? Nice dog, whatever, right? Have a little conversation. Don't get too involved, right? Whatever, but just have a nice conversation, witness them, show them a bit of dignity. Yeah. So even when you've got nothing to give, you still got something to give. You can afford someone else dignity. I still see my youngest do that today. That makes me very proud.
I remember at the time you tell me that story, and a few weeks later I was in Melbourne with my daughter.
Yeah.
And there was a young lady, I think, I'm guessing she was mid-20s, 30, maybe 30, sitting on the sideway, begging ball out, everyone ignoring her.
Yep.
I said to my daughter, let's not give her money, but let's go and buy some lunch. Let's go and get some sandwich, some fruit. So my daughter said, that's great. And so we went and got the shop and got that. I said, but here's the trick.
Yep.
I want you to not just give it to her, I want you to sit down and you give her one sandwich and you eat the other one.
Yep. Good on you.
Because that is
that
is the respect, dignity moment of, I am not a charity case. I'm actually having lunch with somebody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's dignity. So that's really what I mean by that. You've always got something to give. And I see it in both the boys now. I see it, for Harrison through his refereeing, and Edward obviously through that experience. And I see them practicing those things now. It's just part of who they are. And that's what Kids Giving Back is all about, right? It's about teaching the next generation about generosity, and you see it there. And that was a valuable lesson to me. So yeah, I didn't have anything in my pocket, but still do something, and somehow that made the weight feel a little lighter. It was as valuable to me as it was to that individual. So yeah, there's something in that, and it's just stuck with me.
I want to talk to you about two things. I want to talk to you about writing and running.
Okay.
You mentioned a running club in Perth for folks who are homeless. People who don't know you may not know you are an avid ultra marathon runner.
Yes, yeah, I do.
The Montaigne 50 running challenge.
50
mile.
mile.
You did that at age 50.
That was a 50 mile, so 80 kilometre run through the Lake District. We did that a couple of years ago. And I've done some others since. We did the Pico Trail Challenge. That was 7 marathons in 7 days in the mountains in Sri Lanka. So I love running.
So it wasn't the flat, it was the mountains.
It was the mountains, yeah.
You did 7 days in a row.
So that was like, what was it, for runners out there, about 1,600 metres combined elevation a day in Sri Lanka. The Montaigne 50 was about 3,800 metres combined elevation over the 50 miles. That was pretty tough. It was fun though. Now, I can say that now.
Why do you do it?
That's a good question. The fundraising, right? So both of those events were about raising awareness and raising funds for the IFS Foundation. Yeah. I enjoy physical fitness. I realise that I need something to aim for, core value, achievement. I need goals to aim for. Otherwise, I will run each day. I enjoy it, but I like having a sense of purpose about the running, working towards something. So, for example, in July this year, I'm going to be running the Coast to Coast Path in the UK. It's 300 kilometres. We're going to try and do that in 6 days. So 50 kilometres a day. So I'm slowly building up to that.
Right. So that's more than a marathon every day.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that gets me out of bed this morning to run 10K. And I might otherwise maybe have just run 5K or walked 4 or whatever. Okay. So it's partly self-discipline, but it's also it's about mental fortitude as well. So, once you get to those kind of longer distances, your body, our bodies are machines, right? If you, a good friend of mine, Kathy, she says that it's like these things, that extended eating and drinking competitions. Actually, your body, you just got to keep putting fuel into your body and it will keep performing. Well, you've got to look after it, stretch and all that kind of stuff. But if you keep putting fuel in the system, it will keep going. But your brain sure doesn't believe that. So your brain is going to do all sorts of things to try to play tricks on you because it sees that it knows its reserves are being depleted. So it's sending out messages. Time to stop now. You got to stop. Oh, you see that ache that's really hurting your leg. It's just your little inner voice and it's just nagging away. And what these things have taught me is the mental fortitude to overcome that, to even welcome that voice, to look forward to it.
Welcome back to your friend.
Right. And I got you. And to the point where you even look forward to it. And, I would also say that the other thing, the mantra that keeps me going on those things is you will experience pain. Like you do not do those things without experiencing pain. My pain is my privilege. It's my privilege. And how grateful am I have the opportunity to do something like that, and to put that ability to good use in service to other things like the IFS Foundation. So my pain is my privilege. That's how I deal with my inner voice when those moments happen.
So you were always a runner, but you've enhanced that the last couple of years.
Yep.
When I first met you, you were an emerging writer, even though you didn't know that.
Yeah.
We are part of a music club. And when you lived in Australia before you went to Singapore, the group would go to a live gig at least once a week.
Yep.
And about 7 a.m. the next morning, a review of the gig would arrive in our emails. It was a music critic's review of the gig.
It was great, eh?
And the rest of us in the club were going, where's Steve's review?
Yeah.
And I remember saying to you for years, hey, you're a writer. Like, you got to do some writing. You now have a Substack. You now have a Medium page. You post to LinkedIn regularly. So this is relatively new for you.
Yes.
Tell me about the writing and what it's giving you, and what are you exploring through writing? So
I think I always used to do things like that. I really enjoyed those music reviews. I used to do it for my kids as well when they were young, age under 8 football games. I'd write football reviews. I'd write match reports. In fact, one year I even made a football program, like a fake manager interview and photographs from the season, all that kind of stuff, and all the results in it. I used to keep the stats. I've still got Harrison's football stats. I've still got Edward's cricket stats. I think I've still got the program somewhere. And it was a bit of fun, right? But I used to really enjoy it, and it was a way of, I don't know. I look back on it now, community, right? So it was
always there.
Always there. Just didn't see it right in front of my eyes. Now we've obviously started this business with a Wisdom Vault, and I kind of figured, well, that would be a good opportunity to get a share of a voice out there. Perhaps at first, you and I discussed using writing as perhaps a way of introducing people into the Wisdom Vault. It could be a pathway for people to discover the work that we're doing. I hope it works that way. It's proven to be an exercise in humility.
There are thousands of readers.
We'll start with, I don't know, up to 30 or so, slowly creeping up. And maybe that's, friends and family. And I'm very grateful to anyone that takes the time to read it. But I find it rewarding. I realised that it was interesting at first. You think, oh, what should I write about? I should write about things that people are interested in. And so you try a few things on for size, and then you kind of, wait a minute, it doesn't feel very authentic. So now try and write things that might be relevant to what we're talking about, maybe a guest that's on the podcast or something. And actually, the ones I've most enjoyed were the ones I've just written for me. Like the match reports, and I've got to be honest with you, the music reviews and the match reports, I write them for me. I had such fun writing those music reviews and those match reports. I'd sit down with a beer, in my hand, or a glass of wine or whatever at the end, I'd get back, and sometimes I'd get back and I'd go straight to my desk and I'd write them. I'd had so much fun thinking up crazy words, and I'd listen to what people said during their gigs or on the sidelines of the football games and include that in the conversations, how people felt some good shit. I just loved it. And so I realised it's just right for me, hey. And maybe, try a bit of vulnerability and see how that goes. And so I've found myself writing about things that I care about and care, yes, it'd be nice if more people read it, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it because I've got these things inside me and I want to get it out, and I enjoy the experience. I'm learning as I go. Tell you a story. I had a really good mate at secondary school. We were best mates. We were BFFs, right? Really close. Both massive Bob Dylan fans. We both went to different universities. We came back. We lived together in London for a while, straight out of university. And then we drifted apart. My fault. I didn't invest in the relationship in the way that I should. We just drifted off, whatever. It's been 30 years since I've spoken to him, 25, 30 years. Anyway, I published that article on Bob Dylan. Got a LinkedIn message. Hey, Steve, good to see you still like Bob Dylan. It's like, Alex, how you doing, mate? And it's like, yeah, good. In December, just past, we caught up for dinner in London.
Brilliant.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
That shared love of Bob Dylan kept us going all this time.
Bob who?
Yeah, radio. Yeah. But it was just wonderful to have that connection again. And if that's all I get out of writing, it's a win for me as far as I'm concerned. Right?
I want to take you back to 2020, because when we had that episode on the leadership diet, you had recently moved to Singapore, maybe the previous year.
Yes.
You had been the group CEO of an organisation in Australia, overseeing quite a few different organisations.
Yep.
And you were planning an IPO.
Yep.
So you were really in the thrust of it.
Yes.
And then you got a call from a former boss saying, hey, have I an idea for you?
Yes.
And he kind of played a trump card for you, which in hindsight was masterful. Tell us about that, and tell us about like what led you to stepping away from that role to arguably taking a smaller role, but it's turned out to be an amazing role.
I was working at FTS Group. It was a privately held organisation. I'd been through a divorce process, come out the other side, group CEO. We had doubled revenue over the previous few years. We'd been growing profitability. We'd made some acquisitions. We'd engaged PwC to sort out books. We're beginning to think about IPO, who could represent us through that process, ego in full flight, right? I was mid-40s, so, I was thinking that could be the peak of my career. That was the mountain I was aiming for, right? What a wonderful opportunity to take an organisation.
And a great opportunity.
Yeah, and there's all the financial reward that potentially come with that, but the learning and the ego, and I was besotted by the idea, right, of this culmination of my career. And as you say, my former boss came along. We'd worked together at a company, Software AG. We'd both been on the management board together, and we'd kept in touch after we both left that organisation. And so there was a personal friendship there and loyalty. But when you sit down, you look at it, right? The fundamentals of what he was offering from a kind of commercial financial position were broadly similar, if not, as you say, a little bit worse, right? He was offering a regional leadership role, something I'd done before, versus a group CEO planning to go through an IPO process. Yeah. The money was broadly similar. There were some stock options available in both situations. But the thing that sticks with me is a phrase that I learned. I was on a course recently with the National University of Singapore. And as part of this course, there was a module on appreciation of art. And the professor took us to an art gallery. And the exercise was walk around the art gallery for 15 minutes until you find a piece of art that breaks your saunter. And that was the phrase he used, breaks your saunter. Uh-huh. This idea about just something that stops you. You don't know why, you don't know quite what it is, but there's something just connects with you. And he describes that as like the when of art. When it breaks your saunter, well, then that is art. The point being, what broke my saunter in the conversation with Darren and the opportunity with IFS was the chance to build a CSR program with that organisation. He told me he'd witnessed me. He'd seen how over the previous years I'd got more involved in volunteering, skills-based volunteering, and kind of social impact work and so on. He recognised that was important to me, and he felt like that he could offer something that was meaningful to me beyond the kind of the commercial attributes of the role. I mean, right, sales 101. Right?
I mean, what I love about this, and Darren, like many people, are brilliant salespeople, which is why they progress through the careers and through the pathways of corporate life. And he's been a very successful CEO and now the chair.
Yep.
He recognized two things. One is you were very, very experienced working for him successfully in an Asia Pac, Japan, Middle East role. Yep. And he wanted someone in that role.
Yes.
So he trusted that you could do that.
Yes.
But because he'd done it before, that would not be enough.
Yes.
And he figured out, I've noticed you're doing something really, really interesting that I think I can offer you over here as well.
Yes.
How cool was that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's just the secret of a good trade, isn't it? It didn't necessarily mean that much to him. He recognised it was important. Fair play to him. He used this phrase actually during the conversation. Listen, I'm shareholder capitalist knife, you're stakeholder capitalist fork, right? I need that. I can't do that. That's not what I'm good at. But we need that in the organisation. So we recognised the need. So clearly there was a need within the organisation. But I really felt witnessed in that moment. Like he really understood me, saw what I'd gone through, saw the journey that I'd been on, and was talking directly to that part of me. That broke my saunter, and it made it a very easy decision. There were some challenges. It would require relocating to Singapore, but there were some positives associated with that. The ability to rebuild financially post divorce, all that kind of good stuff. But it was in that moment, that chance to build out a CSR program, to go on to then build a charity, an independent charity on behalf of IFS, that really was the reason. It was difficult. Again, the ego was besotted by the idea. I still have a lot of really good friends at FTS Group. That's now Atura. They did list. They are on the ASX. They're doing really well. No conflict of interest. I don't own any shares there. But they're a great bunch of people. I'm having dinner with the chair tonight, right? We're still really good friends. But that was the difference in that moment.
So you ended up moving to Singapore, and we'll talk about the impact on you and family and being a father as well, and all of that in a few minutes. Over the years of knowing you and talking to you regularly while you were there, you only ever talked about one thing, the foundation, which is what Darren had recognized.
Yeah.
So tell us about the foundation that you helped build and what it does and where it's come to.
Yeah, sure. Favourite subject alert. Firstly, I'd say the one thing that Darren also did really well in that conversation was he did ask me to be the regional president, so for Asia Pacific, Japan, Middle East and Africa. And he said something like, look, as long as you keep doing your number, you can continue to focus on all the CSR work. So, it was a good trade, all things considered, for all of us. So the IFS Foundation, we as IFS continues to be privately held as an organisation, private equity ownership. It was at the time much smaller than it is today, and it was involved in a lot of different kind of charitable initiatives all over the world. And the way I describe it is, we were servicing issues, we weren't really making a meaningful impact. And we wanted to find a way to harness our global fundraising potential and kind of channel that towards one particular topic of interest. What would be that thing that would unite us? Well, at the time, IFS had been present in Sri Lanka for just over 20 years back then, getting close to 30 now. Our largest workforce is based in Sri Lanka. The IFS ecosystem relies on the work there every day, right? Research and development, global support, shared services. There is some exceptional talent in Sri Lanka.
How many people do you have there working there?
Now it's about, I guess it's about 40% of the workforce. I would say 3,000 people
Wow, so
today.
substantial number.
We're the largest IT employer in Sri Lanka today. And then when you also look at Sri Lanka, it's also a country that is incredibly resilient, incredibly beautiful country, but it's also been beset by some serious economic and political issues over the past. And particularly when you step outside of the major cities, you move into the rural communities, there's absolute levels of poverty there. So it felt like something where, okay, it's reflective of who we are as an organisation. It's something where we could harness our global fundraising potential. It matters to our staff and to our customers and to our partners, to IFS. Well, that became a natural focal point. We built it from scratch. It was a bunch of us, some folks from Europe, some folks in Sri Lanka, myself, and we got together and we were given the freedom to figure it out. We went out into these communities. We sat down and we started doing it very consciously. We didn't want to come in there with this whole needs-based assessment, trying to look for what's wrong and that kind of almost post-colonial kind of let us tell you how to do things.
White man, Western mentality. We can fix you.
Right? That's just, we really, really worked hard to avoid that trap. Instead, we spent a lot of time just sitting down, drinking coconuts and listening and talking with community representatives in different communities and just listening to their stories. Not about what's wrong, but maybe what's strong in a community, and thinking about how do they survive day to day, how do they make things work, and if we were to partner with them, how could we contribute to what they're already doing and serve as like useful outsiders. That was the mentality we took, and sure enough, the consistent theme came out of like anywhere in the world, families want their kids to get the best education possible. They know that is the pathway.
Get to school.
Right, get to school, better health and well-being outcomes, with a decent education as much as you're able to. That was the issue that kept on coming up. So how can we lean into that? What are the obstacles that prevent kids getting access to an education? So we started looking at things like sanitation for homes that had none, access to fresh drinking water to prevent the risk of people drinking groundwater with all the problems that came with that. Upgrading healthcare infrastructure, creating local employment opportunities, especially for women in those communities. And then eventually, looking at education infrastructure and trying to build that to increase capacity, to extend learning all the way through to year 12, to make sure that kids go to school and stay at school by giving them a really good environment. All the way through trying to share knowledge and transfer knowledge into that community as best we can. So it felt like the change was being owned by the community. It was community-led. That would make it easier for us at the end of a 4 or 5 year period to then step back. In fact, success for us looks like the community going,
we don't need you.
We don't need you. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah. We've got this, right? And the good news is we've seen that happening. And
from memory, because you often give me updates over the years of talking to you. You helped create some schools. You helped create water. As you said, move from brown water to water. As simple as it is, and this is what always struck me about the work you were doing there. Water, we're drinking water as we're talking here. It's a natural resource, and you just take it for granted when it's clean. But it prevents whole communities from living, as in going to school.
First of all, you've got the act of getting access to water in the first place. So if you don't want to drink the groundwater, which is sensible, right? Because it's often heavily contaminated, then you go find a water pump that might be, some distance away, right? So there was the time taken to go and fetch the water and bring it back. That water is straight tube well, so it's still likely to be contaminated. There's a real problem with chronic kidney disease in Sri Lanka. So you drink that stuff, you pump out the ground, you're still going to get sick. So you then have to boil it, right? So there's time taken to do that as well. So it's all time taken out of the day, whether that's productive time for parents who would otherwise be growing crops or working, or earning money or whatever, or kids being kept at home to help out and they're not getting education. So just provide fresh drinking water. So we build these reverse osmosis water treatment plants. So the water that comes out the tap is fresh drinking water. I've drunk it myself. It's fantastic. And it's just a time saver. It prevents the risk of common ailments and illnesses. And it just gives kids that little extra window of opportunity to get more.
They're no longer infectious either, of course, amongst that group, so they
Exactly.
can all be there. Yeah,
exactly that.
You've said to me, and I know you've written this, that the intentionality of getting involved in the foundation eventually led to the greatest gift you've ever had in your professional career.
Yeah.
Now, I'm interested in this from a meaning point of view, because in anyone's professional career who is interested in being a CEO, leading an organization through an IPO is probably the highest pinnacle of that kind of career.
Yeah.
And you walked away from it, and you now say, actually, the experience of the foundation was the greatest gift you ever had.
Yeah. Yeah.
This whole podcast is based upon how do we reinvent ourselves in
Yeah.
the second half of life. You've done that.
Yeah. A little. Trying.
And you are doing that still.
Yeah.
But tell me more about the greatest gift, because that's really interesting.
If I think about, as I said to you before, I was mid-40s, we're getting ready for the IPO. And of course, there's an underlying aspect here, let's be clear, about financial freedom. Financial freedom's incredibly important, to be able to provide for oneself, to be able to provide for one's family, right? That brings opportunity and choice, right? So that is important. The more I get involved with the IFS Foundation, the more that I lean into that and experience that joy of community and a sense of belonging and the learning that comes with it. It's far more meaningful. It's an incredible gift. It is a privilege to be able to work in that space, to be able to learn. I meet these people in these communities each time I go out there. Over time, I've come to realize they're my real heroes.
Yeah.
If I think back 10 years ago, I think about business leaders and people that done incredible things, and that's incredible, whatever. Actually, no. The real heroes, the people in these communities. The image I have in my mind right now is of an elderly couple who show up. There's a village in Medampi. There's a medical centre there. And this elderly couple turn up, they live nearby, they turn up every day, they clean the yard, they tend to the garden. They do it for no other reason than they just care about this asset and they care about the community. And every time I go there, I observe them, they go and talk to all the staff, they talk to the people that are there, they know everyone there, with these connectors in this community. They are enabling this community to survive and thrive in incredibly difficult circumstances. Yeah. They're my heroes, right? And I care much more deeply about them today than any any kind of business leaders or those people that I once held up to be kind of heroes in my life. And I hope that's just a change of perspective.
You and I have discussed many times over the last couple of years. I'm going to talk this about you.
Yeah.
We've discussed me too.
Yeah.
But that's not interesting for this body show. But we've talked about, I've remarked to you, the quality of conversation, the depth of conversation, the topics that are interesting to you, post-divorce and post-foundation, are dramatically different to who you are. And it doesn't mean in any way that the version of you in your 40s was wrong, bad, whatever. Not at all. It's just very, very different. You're still as focused, you're still as driven, you're still as outcome-oriented as you ever were. And you would never have been in those positions if you weren't.
No.
But the interest you have and the depth of emotion for those are dramatically different.
Yes. And the landscape, the feeling, the things that seem to matter to me more now, have changed a great deal. There's no other way to put that. I think that's an interesting perspective. I think that maybe there were some things that were always there, but maybe they just kind of came to the surface more. I realised them. I think the work that I've been doing with the foundation seems to me to feel much more closely aligned with my kind of core values as I understand them to be than perhaps I ever realised before. Yeah. You have this idea, sometimes we as people, we build a persona, a professional work persona, and we take on all these attributes, and I sometimes kind of feel, yes, you're right, a sense of achievement is a core value of mine, right? I am quite a driven individual, but some of those other attributes, I realised I was carrying a persona of what it means to be a successful business leader. Yeah. And I felt they were necessary. They were necessary close to where to be successful in that role. But actually, I measure success very, very differently now. Grateful that I've got the financial freedom to be able to make those choices, but I can now address the things that matter to me. So success feels very different. Success feels much more about aligning myself with the intentionality and living according to my core values than ideas of material success or those professional work attributes.
What I'm loving about your writing is you're going into subjects that are really relevant for our age group. And yes, as you said, you're writing for an audience of one sometimes, but you're in our age group, right?
Yep.
So you did an article recently on andropause. It's a thing.
Yep, it's a thing.
Yeah, you've talked about your dad and healthcare for your parent, and
Yes.
we are the classic sandwich generation, taking care of our kids and our parents.
Yep.
And so, whilst you might be writing for an audience of one, sometimes the wider audience is actually still very relevant.
Absolutely.
And so, I'm really glad you're doing that. You mentioned the Wisdom Vault, which is the whole reason why we're talking today. The Wisdom Vault is the media organization that is where the Don't Let the Old Man In podcast is part of, and we set it up to help men navigate midlife. Why are you involved? What do you see as being the gap that the Wisdom Vault is trying to step into and help?
First of all, you and I have talked over the time about different business ideas. You've had a few, and we've talked about them. This one for me, pragmatic, at a very fundamental level. I saw some commercial viability in it, right? Just being completely open, and so a sense of achievement. Wow, we could build something from scratch. I'd never been involved in a startup before. I'm trying to link this back to my core values when I'm thinking about it, and then we'll think about how it can manifest itself. So for me, it was the core values of potentially a sense of achievement, build something from scratch, a learning opportunity. And here's the thing that really resonates with me, the sense of identity, of a community, sense of building a community, the sense of, if I think back to some of the things we've spoken about, I didn't have people to talk to at times when perhaps I needed them. That was on me, right? Okay, now, how can I try and help facilitate, enable a community of like-minded people that are able to talk, that are able to demonstrate a bit of vulnerability, that are able to share, not to fix problems, not to fix that, but to just listen for the purpose of understanding, and maybe just sharing experiences. And through that, we might grow stronger. We might be able to help one another, through life, right? And it might help us as we move through this world. So for me, the opportunity to help engender that community and share different perspectives, and to help folks maybe realise that, as they're navigating midlife, that they're not on their own doing that, and that there are people that they can reach out to and chat with, not for solutions, not to try to, monetize that with this or that pill or this or that remedy, but just to have the conversation. And that sense of community, I think, is important, is needed. I value it. It manifests itself through the music club. It manifests itself through our friendship and the friendships that we both share with others. And I hope to create that safe space for other people as well.
I was in Oxford last week because I'm doing some study over there, and I was at a conference.
Yep.
And I knew a few people at the conference, but mostly I'd never met anyone there before because I don't go to Oxford that often. But 3 people came up to me who said, I know Don't Let the Old Man In podcast, and of which 2 were women. Said, I'm listening to this in order to help me have better conversations with my man.
Right.
And this is what I think you said in terms of our purpose in this whole podcast was to do a few things. One is to raise the notion of midlife raises a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of issues. And how do we overcome those? But one of the opportunities is reinvention, in terms of I can do the second half of life differently, as we say, gracefully or disgracefully, but either way on our own terms.
Yes.
And one thing we weren't expecting, but we're seeing more and more and more, is we have a lot of women listeners going, I want to understand what my man is thinking,
yep,
and therefore how I can help. So that's an outcome that we thought might happen, but it's exciting.
I think it's great.
It is.
I know we talked quite a bit when we were looking at this. Should it be about for people navigating midlife? Should it be for men? Is that exclusionary or not? It's like there was a unique male perspective, and perhaps because we've both got lived experience, we might be better placed to be able to talk to that and navigate that. I want it to be as inclusive as possible, but we hold a perspective which is men navigating midlife, and I think that's appropriate, and it feels right and proper for what we do.
2 last questions for you. On your LinkedIn profile,
oh yeah,
I don't know if you remember this, you have a quote from, I think it's from a David White poem, where you say, "What parts of me have never met?" You've adapted a line. Yeah. Now that you're on the other side of this whole massive change in your life over the last 10 years, what parts of you still have not met, or what are you doing to try and help them introduce to each other?
You asked me that question once, and I recall it was in relation to, in my work context, I was very disciplined, highly motivated, strong sense of achievement. My personal life was quite creative, music and so on. And you're like, hey, what happens if you brought more creativity into your work environment? What happens if you brought more sort of discipline to your creativity? And I think obviously I can see that now. The underlying part is to let's break down this falsehood around work-life balance. Perhaps better still, it was an invitation to say, hey, you've got a work persona. You've built this whole personality for yourself. Is that really who you are? So there's this other part of you. How do you live in a more integrated way, in a more authentic way that's aligned with your core values? It was probably the first question I'd asked myself that led me on that journey. So today, I don't know if I could answer the question the same way. If I feel at any point that kind of cognitive dissonance or disconnect, if I ever feel that, I think I've kind of developed a certain self-awareness. Go, hang on a minute, it doesn't feel right to me. Why am I behaving in that way? And I don't always stop it. Sometimes I still do stupid stuff for all my faults and flaws, but I'm kind of a bit more aware of that. That's inconsistent. I need to make amends, or I need to do something. I'm going to approach that in a different way. So I feel less, the question's less burning for me now compared to when it was then. Question that I ask myself sometimes, but more in the context of, is this true to who I am? Does this feel right to me? And I apply my values more coherently to those types of questions than perhaps I was doing before. Makes sense?
Perfect. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you.
I've got one more question I want to throw at you. But the story you've outlined today, in my mind, is a great example, a great lived example of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, in the sense of anyone who's familiar with that format, and most Hollywood movies use that to create the story, and a lot of great books are written with that framework, and it's not unique to Joseph Campbell. But he talks about, addressing some big challenges or issues, going into the dark of the night, gets very, very dark in the night, hits more challenges at many aspects. You could walk away from those and just come back, but choose to carry on and kind of come out the other side a much bigger version of the person who started the journey. And when I listen to what you've talked about today, all of us, all men listening to this, face midlife challenges, but we don't always walk into them. And we certainly don't sit in the dark of the night, because it's easier not to. And the reason why we don't is because it's painful. But for those of us who kind of go, this is really important, what you've outlined is on the other side of that, God, it can be good.
Yeah, it can. I'll borrow a phrase from yourself again that you used before. What was it? Simplicity lies on the other side of complexity. So sometimes you have to go in. You have to go in and go figure it out, and it's not easy. It's the Dante quote, isn't it? The mid stage of life, I went into the forest dark, and found myself lost. I've butchered that particular phrase, but I think simplicity lies on the other side of complexity, and I think it's you can, of course, many people do live their life just trying to avoid that, but I think that's an uncomfortable thing, and sooner or later it's going to manifest itself in really unhealthy ways. You've got to tackle it at some point. You've got to face it head on, and I want to do it now when I'm capable and I'm able, not my dying days, whatever. I want to deal with it now. I don't want to be on my deathbed holding regret. So tackle it, deal with it, own your mess. That's what I'd say. I take responsibility, and if you can do that, then simplicity does lie on the other side of complexity.
David Keys, thank you. Thanks for listening or watching, depending which platform you're accessing this podcast on. I hope you enjoyed it. I really got a lot from that conversation. And I will record a short episode next on what I've learned, my thoughts in the conversation, some reflections, and I'm going to do an experiment based upon what I've learned today. So you'll hear about that in the next episode. If you want a permanent reminder of what we chatted about or some of the key summary points, go to don'tlettheoldmanin.com/reflections and download that. In the meantime, don't let the old man in. We'll see you next time.